quaint seaside towns, golden beaches and crisp sunsets might have been what you'd pictured for the Beachfront Properties DLC. However, Cities Skylines 2, the highly embattled game, maybe didn't deliver with an overwhelmingly negative response. In this video, we'll talk about the emergency hotfix patch that was just released for Cities Skylines 2, as well as the devs' communications over what has been a terrible week, the Beachfront DLC reception at large, and some more delays that I may have just uncovered. Sit back and relax, we've got a lot to discuss, and not a lot of time to do it, so let's jump straight in. And we're going to start with the patch update. Most recent thing just came out, and hopefully we're starting with the good news. They call it a small hotfix to address some of the reports they've received following that patch last week, the modding wavelet patch. They say they'll keep working on bug fixes and going through the feedback. Of note, they say, please note that we're still investigating the issue causing mods to not initialize when you first start the game. If you encounter it and no mods are shown, restart your game, and if that doesn't help, they'd like you to report it. So that one hasn't been fixed. My game, by the way, after this patch update, has still crashed playing mods. I would love to hear your anecdotes too, but let's look at the patch itself. Fixed crashes to desktop or other problems, apparently after starting a game on a map that has pre-placed buildings. Cases where logging out of the Paradox account would prevent accessing mods, an issue causing no mods to show up, darkening of map thumbnails and preview images, alongside a few other things. They've added some badges for DLC content, Paradox mods, added page scrolling. Of course, you can see the full patch notes on your screen, which you have done, and my sources, as always, will be linked below. Not much of an update today, a hotfix to address largely crashing issues or other small issues that may have occurred from the most recent patch. Now we need to cast our mind back to when the patch just went live around a week ago at the time of recording. Mods had just been released, mind you, in beta, and unfortunately things weren't going so well. And I believe that these problems have at least somewhat continued. My personal experience can speak to that. And unfortunately, right from its inception, PDX Mods was overloaded and lagging with the overwhelming support, and they see that they were working on a fix, and of course we've seen a fix already to the game. They say it's shown to them the importance, shown to Paradox actually, they say, how important modding is to the community, and we, assuming Colossal order, will learn from this. While we work on trying to get the load down, or fix the problems, I suppose that's what they meant there, the best thing you can do is be patient, love hard. And of course, some patience is absolutely going to be required here. While this was happening, of course, the Beach Properties Asset Pack was released. And I have to say, out of all of the games that I've covered on this channel over a few years now, some of them not great launch reviews. Thinking Humankind, for example, one from a while back. More recently, maybe Victoria 3. Now we're looking at Cities Skylines 2. This is probably the worst I've ever seen, though. At the time of recording, reviews are overwhelmingly negative, which somehow feels like an understatement for the sentiment, which is sitting at just 4% of the 1,158 user reviews. It's 4% positive. So obviously it wasn't received well, and you didn't need to have a crystal ball to predict this. And finally, at the same time as all of this was going on, they released Beach Properties Developer Diary number 1, creating an asset pack, where they said, hey, Beach Properties is out. It's time for a, quote, mini-series of development diaries covering our process and giving you a peek at the new assets, end quote. However, nothing else followed. Radio silence on the developer diaries front. Of course, we heard today about the patch update, but no more acknowledgement of this. It was quickly shuffled along, it seems. Or, of course, they could have taken a break over Easter and decided to formulate their thoughts and come back, perhaps soon, with something a little bit different. In the first part of this alleged miniseries, they say that asset packs are a, quote, new type of official content, end quote, that opens up the chance to add more building variations to the game and brings you more ways to let your city stand out. The first pack, Beach Properties, has something new for peaceful, low-density residential areas. Yeah, okay. So I'm not entirely sure if this is new, or what the angle was. Maybe it's the building variations part. I don't know. This doesn't feel like a new model to me though. Not at all, really. And a quick follow-up from the editing room. I wanted to delve a little deeper, and it would seem expansion packs, music packs, and content creator packs are the three broad categories that they at least list on the Cities Skylines 1 page. I would note, looking at these prices, you can tell they were released a while ago, some of them, because they are quite a bit cheaper than the Beachfront pack, which was at least 16 New Zealand dollars if you didn't want the radio station. I just thought I'd chuck this in here, bit of context. It seems to me it's semantics. They go on to talk about beach properties, how it includes 60 new buildings. Of course, we've talked about the wording around this before. It's 60 new buildings, but it's not really. It's 10 plus another 10, American, European, and then those buildings have 3 different variations depending on the land value or what have you. So there's a bit more. They sort of go on, they talk about with the Ultimate Edition, we've announced a few different DLCs, asset packs, and expansions, which present different ways to deliver content. And of course, as you may know, the Beachfront properties is the first part of a more broader look at the game's waterfront assets, and we're expecting more of those soon, though somehow I don't think it's going to be as soon even as they've most recently said. We'll talk about that in the final part of the video. But first, to round up and conclude, I'm not going to go through the rest of that developer diary. There wasn't really much else in it, except for the fact, if this interests you, that they didn't start properly working on the assets until closer to the game's release in last October. So it has certainly been a busy few months. They have probably stepped in a big pile here with the Beachfront DLC. I still stand by the fact that they probably had to release it. It was part of the Ultimate Edition. People had bought it. You owed them. But man alive, has this reception been negative, or has this reception been overwhelmingly negative? And for good reason. I mean, it should be fairly obvious, right? The DLC is too expensive. As I talked about last time, the opportunity cost of spending 21 New Zealand dollars on it is just too high. That's 1/3 of the price of Millennia, a fully fledged game. Granted, very different, a little bit more perhaps, maybe a smaller target audience, shall we say, but nonetheless, that is just not comparable. The asset base is, of course, too limited. They received a whole load of flack in the Steam reviews for selling DLC for a broken game. Things along the lines of, game is broken, we'll just sell you some shacks. And finally, of course, and the most obvious point that I didn't explicitly mention perhaps in my last video, maybe I should have, there are no beaches. Now, to be fair, they kind of get around it by calling it Beachfront Properties. It's very specifically ring-fenced to talk about the properties. And so I'm going to throw them a bone there. Nobody's going to like me doing that, but I'm going to do it anyway, because it is literally in the name Properties. Do I have an issue with how many properties there are? Absolutely. There are nowhere near enough. Where are the commercial buildings, for starters? But putting that aside, I kind of have to even concede on that one though, right? You would expect something that looks like a beach to be in the game to go along with beachfront properties, and I think that's perfectly reasonable and rounds out the final criticism, at least the main criticism of the Beachfront DLC. Obviously, it also probably goes without saying that the recommendation is you don't need it and should not buy it. Maybe in future, when the games have more updates, when more of this DLC is out and we get an idea about the full package, that recommendation might change. But for now, it still absolutely stands just as it did in my video from a week ago. In that video, we also looked at the updated roadmap that Colossal Order have released somewhat recently. And it's relevant to this video because the final thing on there, Q4 of 2024, sees the completion, or at least the substantive element of this beachfront, waterfront kind of DLC package. However, while I was doing the research for this video, I noticed something a little bit unusual. On the Steam page, it's listed as not Q4 2024, but Q1 2025. It had already been delayed to Q4. Has it been delayed again? This can't be a New Zealand time zone difference unless the release date is scheduled for 31 December or like right at the end of a quarter. Maybe it's just a me thing though. That's why I thought I'd put it at the end of this video, because like I don't know, right? This is literally just what I've observed. And with that, I think it's a good time to end the video. In conclusion, it was nice to see, and good news, a prompt hotfix rollout for Cities Skylines 2. In my anecdotal experience though, my game is still crashing sometimes. Beachfront DLC, almost universally rejected. A rounding error, those positive people at best. Thirdly, the overall week for Cities Skylines 2 has been pretty rough, and the communications have been a little bit splattered. And finally, it might be a good idea to refrain from making future date-based, content-based promises, particularly in these diaries, because it seems to only be leading to further problems, and maybe there are further delays with the rest of this DLC coming as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this whirlwind video in a very rough week for Cities Skylines 2. I'll see you in the next one.